Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Today's video is called Rock and Metal from Australia. So hard rock and metal bands from Australia. It's a follow-up from my last video where I did New Zealand hard rock and metal bands. So releases in my collection from New Zealand bands from the 80s and early 90s. So today I'm going to show you records in my collection from Australian bands, hard rock and metal bands that came out in the 80s, early 90s. So obviously the biggest band probably to come out from out of Australia would be the guys behind me, ACDC. I'm not going to focus too much on them. Everyone sort of knows them pretty well. I'll show you their debut release. That's not an easy one to get on vinyl. It's certainly it'll cost you a fair bit if you want to buy it. And that's the High Voltage by ACDC. So this is the Australian release of High Voltage, and their debut release. So show you that one, but obviously you can do your own video. I can do a whole video all by itself just on ACDC. So many albums they've released. So I want to focus more on some of those Australian rock and metal bands from the 80s and early 90s. Some of you may not be aware of. Starting off with a band that I actually mentioned in my last video, as I compared a New Zealand band to this band, as saying that they sounded a little bit like them. The band I was referring to was Roxas, and this was their debut single. It's called Body Heat. It's a great track, and I guess you'd probably compare Roxas, have a bit of a Bon Jovi kind of a vibe, and the song didn't feature on their debut album. They did release an album. I think it came out in 1992. This single came out in 1990, I'm pretty sure. They did release, though, in 1990 a 4-track 12-inch EP. It's a live EP, so it's got 4 tracks on it. Actually, gatefold. There the guys are there. And it's also got Body Heat on this one too. It's got Stand Back, which is on the debut album. But they're live tracks. The debut album, the full-length album, is not easy to get, and if you can find it, it usually goes for quite a bit of money. So I've actually, rather than spending big money or waiting until I find it, I have purchased 3 singles. So I've got 3 45s that were released when the album came out. So that gives me at least a few of the songs from the album on vinyl, and it covers some of my favourites from the album. And my favourite track from the album is a track called Rock and Roll Nights. Now, the single I've got here is Jimmy G, but Rock and Roll Nights is the B-side. So it's great to have that. Because, like I say, that's a kick-ass song. Worth checking out. Yeah, and the other songs are pretty good too. Like I said, mid-80s sort of Bon Jovi hard rock kind of vibe. Stand Back. It's got a exclusive non-album track, which I think is just an instrumental on the B-side. The song I could imagine could have been a hit. It was kind of like their ballad, Where Are You Now? I don't know how successful it was in Australia. Probably did okay. They were on. They were profiled quite a bit in Australia. And they were in the process of recording a second album. I know they went off and wrote and recorded some songs with Jeff Paris. But I think we all know kind of what happened. Varna hit, and it was just like it wasn't going to happen for bands with that sound at that time. So you can hear those recordings, those Jeff Paris session recordings, and they sound pretty good. Could have been probably sounds like they were going for a similar sort of sound to what was on the first album, but it just didn't happen. So let's go back now to some of the more early 80s or mid 80s Australian bands, and this band here is a band called Heaven, and this is their debut album called Bent. This one came out in 1982, and one thing about this album is that there's 2 versions of it. So it's worth considering getting both versions because they have slightly different track listings. This one I've got here has the song In the Beginning, which was not on the original release of this album, their debut album, and it's probably one of their best songs. Check it out, In the Beginning, awesome song. ACDC kind of vibe at times. They've released some other albums as well. I think this was their last album, so I'm not going to show you all their albums. This was their last one, Knocking on Heaven's Door. What's interesting about this one, production by John Jansen and also Paul O'Neill, quite well-known American producers. But yeah, it just didn't quite get the success they probably were hoping for in the end. But yeah, a good solid band, definitely. In fact, all the bands I'm going to show you, these Australian bands, solid, really good, good hard rock metal bands. Now this next one is Angry Anderson and Beats from a Single Drum. Now Angry Anderson was the vocalist from Rose Tattoo, and actually this album, although it's making it out like it's a solo album from Angry Anderson, it is the same album that also was released called Beats from a Single Drum, with Rose Tattoo as the artist. Okay, so it's basically been released first as Rose Tattoo, and then it's been released as under the artist name of Angry Anderson. So which is interesting, isn't it? Yes, exactly the same songs on this album as the one that came out with Rose Tattoo as the artist name. So I don't know quite what happened there. So if you've got Beats from a Single Drum by Rose Tattoo, it's the same as the one from Angry Anderson. But this is the only one I've got of that album. And yeah, again, Rose Tattoo got some ACDC vibes and similarities, got compared to them some from time to time. Yeah, it obviously didn't have the success, but it's good solid hard rock from the 80s. Now this next band is interesting because you wouldn't necessarily say that were hard rock, but they did get a little bit hard rock on this album. This is Pseudo Echo, and the album's called Race, and worth checking out if you like that sort of 80s hard rock sound, because they started to embrace that on this album. Not so much on their previous albums, but worth checking out. I was quite surprised. I only kind of discovered this fairly recently. I thought they were more of a sort of a real pop rock kind of band. And yeah, there's definitely a pop rock album to some degree, but there's definitely some sort of hair metal influences coming into their sound on this album, and it's got some good songs. So worth checking out. And they were successful. It was interesting how they were successful, and then they still decided to sort of change styles a little bit and sort of follow what was popular at the time, which was that sort of that sort of hard rock hair metal sound that was becoming popular. Didn't quite work for them. I don't think that album did as well as some of their previous albums, but yeah, they did go in that direction. Now, next band I'm going to show you is a band called BB Steel. Now, these guys are probably most well known for the fact that they had Phil Collins from Def Leppard help them out on this album. So he gets quite a good mention in the credits. It's 1991 release, and it sounds very similar to Def Leppard. Yeah, pretty good. Again, I guess the time period 1991 was going to be a bit of a challenge for a band with that kind of a sound to be successful. And I'm not sure how easy it is to get this album now on vinyl, but yeah, worth checking out. And a band that's kind of similar, has a similar kind of a sound, is a band called Demont, and this is Body Language. Now, I like this a lot more, a little bit more anyway, than BB Steel. This is really good. It's more of I guess it's a little bit more hair metal than hard rock. It's got a bit more of a hair metal kind of a vibe. You can see that sort of, I guess, from the picture. that I'm showing on the front from the cover, and the fact that yeah, they just have that kind of demand and the way that they're presenting themselves. A bit more of the hair metal vibe. This came out in 1989 on CBS. Yeah, good production. They were certainly very capable musicians. Some great songs on it. In some ways, you would have expected a little bit more success. I didn't really even hear about them much, even being in New Zealand. They didn't get any press over here really, but so I'm not quite sure how they went in Australia, but so that's a real bit of an obscure one, but worth checking out. Less obscure, this guy is quite well known in Australia and New Zealand. Less well known perhaps in other countries, but he was the vocalist for Cold Chisel, and he released a couple of more than a couple, but he released some for me anyway, a couple of good albums in the 80s for hard rock, and that's Jimmy Barnes. This one's probably, for me anyway, one of my favourites from him, Freight Train Heart. And I say one of my favourites, to be honest with you. There's probably only a couple of songs on here that I really like. Waiting for the Heartache and Too Much Ain't Enough Love. Would be my sort of two of my favourite Jimmy Barnes songs. He got some help from Desmond Child, helping out with the songwriting. Good production. Came out this release here on Mushroom, but I think it was released internationally as well. And like I say, Desmond Child helped out with the songwriting. He also had Neil Schon on guitars and Jonathan Kane on keyboards on some of the tracks. So yeah, some big names helping out there. And like I say, those two songs I mentioned are definitely good ones. I like them. He's really popular in Australia and in New Zealand. He can tour and play stadiums. He was touring and playing stadiums in the 80s and early 90s, and can probably still do that now. A band that also had some success, and they came out in 1991 with this album. The band is Baby Animals, and this is their debut release. And yeah, they also were quite well known here in New Zealand and in Australia. They had some songs on the radio, and they also released a follow-up album called Shaved and Dangerous, which didn't do so good. But again, this was 91. They did pretty well to get some success during that time, but not so much with the follow-up. A standout track for me on this one is Ain't Gonna Get That, just rocks hard, so that's worth checking out. So that's Baby Animals, a nice one to have on vinyl, not easy to get necessarily, and you can't get their next album on vinyl, unfortunately. Bengal Tigers is the next one I wanted to show. This came out on Heavy Metal Worldwide, but it's an Australian band, so this might be easy enough to find in other countries. It's not like an exclusive Australian release because it was released on an international label. So Heavy Metal Worldwide label there. It's interesting that I don't know if maybe my album just didn't come with any inner sleeve, but there's no inner sleeve, no credits really about who's the vocalist, who's the guitar player, and you kind of have to look that kind of stuff up, which I have done, but exactly who those people are, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it does have a bit of information here about the fact that they're an Australian band who were formed in 1980, and it's solid metal, it's very sort of 80s metal. Break and Bend is the track I heard that made me think, I've got to get this. This is really good. Probably some of the other tracks are okay. Definitely got some real heavy metal song titles. Heaven, Got to Deliver, Fallen Angel, Pounding Energy. There's some of the other tracks on the album, but Break and Bend, that's the standout track. It's only 5 songs on it, but 5 songs, but it's really good. Another band that definitely have some strong ACDC vibes They came out with this album in 1994, so it's quite interesting because this is getting, you know, in the sort of grunge kind of period, where metal and hard rock is not popular at all. But they got a release on Columbia, and they released their album called "Who Cares," which was an interesting title, wasn't it? Because I don't know who did care in 1994, but yeah, underrated. Yeah, if you love your ACDC, these guys did it really, really good. Some great songs. I managed to pick up a promo copy that features 4 tracks from the album on vinyl, just because if I can get some of the songs on vinyl, I like to do that. So that's good to have. So the last, there are 2 more things to show here. Now, this one's a 45. Just wanted to mention the Screaming Jets. I felt like I should mention them. They had a bit of success with the song Better. I'm not, to be honest, not a huge Screaming Jets fan, but they did have some success. They were kind of popular, especially in Australia, and I do like that song. So yeah, got that on 45, and that's a good song with Check Me Out. And yeah, they've had a few albums out. But again, early 90s, yeah, a bit of success, and then started to fade away as the 90s came on. Last one I'm going to feature is probably the most obscure one. This is a band called Ice Tiger. Now, I think this has only come out on CD, and this may even be a bootleg, I'm not sure. But the album's called Love and Crime, and it's really good. I quite enjoy it. If you like that sort of 80s hair metal kind of sound. This may have been, it's hard to know because, like I say, I'm not sure this is a legitimate release. There's very little information in here. There's just the song titles. There's no credits or anything. So you kind of have to look it up on the internet to get some bit more information. But yeah, I think it's kind of like early 90s it came out. Who knows when it was recorded? It might have been recorded even earlier than that. But it's solid. Very good production and some good songs on there. All right, so actually do have a couple more I wanted to show. Got to show the Angels, of course. Now the Angels are quite well known. Really popular in Australia. Now this is they released in 1990. They released their single "Dogs Are Talking." And what was interesting about this release is that they released a New Zealand and Australian version, and on the New Zealand version, of the single, they released 2 demos from New Zealand bands. So this is the New Zealand version. So it's got demos of a band called Nine Lives, and I showed Nine Lives in my last video. So a song they do called "Live It Up," and a band called Shehad, who I also mentioned in my last video, New Zealand band, and the demo of Down Dance. So that was quite a cool idea. So they released New Zealand bands as to give them some exposure on the B side of the single, and then on the same single, "Dogs Are Talking," they released on the B side demos and demos from Australian bands, and they feature the Hurricanes, Baby Animals, who I've just talked about, and a band called the Desert Cats. To be honest with you, not too familiar with the Hurricanes or the Desert Cats, but obviously Baby Animals, good to have their track "Break My Heart," a demo of that on the B side. And I think those bands that were on the B side possibly toured with the Angels as well when they did their tour, but I'm not absolutely sure about that. But either way, I thought that was quite a cool idea to release a single and profile some of the bands from each country, putting them on the B side. Last band I wanted to mention, just because they came out with an album at the tail end of the when hard rock and metal was popular. Hair metal especially was starting to lose popularity, and they came out with quite a hair metal album, and the band is Candy Harlots, and I don't have their album, but I do have their single, and it's a 45, and it's Danger. and the B-side is Hot Love Child. And I really like the song Danger. Check out the video on YouTube. It's quite a bizarre video, but yeah, so it's worth checking out. So Candy Harlots and Danger, but there isn't a full-length album as well, but I don't have that, so I can't show it to you. But they definitely, if that album had come out a few years earlier, again, like a lot of bands who released things in the 90s, early 90s, if they'd released it a bit earlier, maybe it might have been a different story for them, a bit more success, but wasn't to be. Alright, so that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time.